Hello everyone and welcome to this video, which is in our Reengineering the Chess Classic series. I'm Grandmaster Matthew Sadler, and probably this is going to be one of the last games of Paul Saladin Leonhardt in this series. And we finish off with a win against the great Polish and French player Leonhardt-Tartakower, played in Karlsbad 1907. An accelerated dragon, quite an interesting opening. Let's have a look how it went. Well, it started actually with d4. Tartakower replied with c5. e4 offered. More a gambit? No, we head back to a normal Sicilian here. And after knight c6, knight takes d4, then Tartakower had to choose which Sicilian to play. Now Leonhardt has actually faced g6 before. This is the normal way of getting an accelerated dragon, and his choice was quite funny. He took and went queen d4. It's not particularly good, but it is quite funny. After knight f6, he played e5, and after knight h5 we got bishop e2, knight g7, castles. And this was a game Leonhardt against Reti in 1920. So Leonhardt won, and that's a pretty good win against a strong player like Reti. The engines prefer knight d5, by the way, in this position. And I just think the black's doing absolutely fine. But yeah, quite interesting all the same. Actually, Leonhardt wasn't always an open Sicilian player. Played a lot of closed Sicilians. Actually a lot of games. He was quite an innovator from that point of view. But anyway, knight f6, knight c3, and now g6, which is slightly incautious. I think with this move order, d6 followed by trying to play g6 would be the best if you want to go back into a dragon, although that's a little bit tricky to achieve. After g6, white gets the possibility of knight takes c6 and sets black for a little bit of a dilemma. I mean, the engines just want to play d takes c6, but it's not everyone's cup of tea. Takes, bishop c4, king e8. White plays e5 most likely. There's also the possibility of playing a4 to a5 quickly. The engines like that too. e5, knight d7, e6 takes bishop e6, and well, it's not going to be very much, but it's going to be a slight edge. Torch played this against Stockfish a couple of times. You just play bishop e3 and castle queenside, and just claim that because of that black pawn, white's got a nice advantage. Also, black finds it a little bit difficult to castle. Got to do a little bit of work to achieve that. So d takes c6 is possible, but Tartakower played b takes c6. That's more his style. So e5 was played, and of course the problem is the knight can't come to d5 because we just take it off. So black's got a couple of choices here. The engines like knight h5, and after bishop c4 then queen a5, hitting the pawn on e5, and if you go f4 to defend it, then bishop a6. Yeah, it all looks a little bit ropey, it must be said, and there were some engine wins here as white after something like takes, and then bishop e3 or queen f3. Just a pleasant position for white, more space, knight out here. Black's still got to work out how to develop, because if bishop g7 we go g4 and trap the knight on h5. So yeah, not a great position. Tartakower played knight g8. And then Leonhardt played a good move, I think, queen f3. Stops you from going, dissuades you from going d5 because of something like e takes d6 and the queen's hitting the pawn on c6. And we're also just threatening bishop c4, hitting the pawn on f7 and getting ready for some quick development and getting the king castled, most likely queenside or even kingside. The engine's getting a little bit desperate here. What they actually wanted was to play the move f5, so at least get that pawn off f7 and then develop with e6 and then knight e7, maybe to d5. It's pretty ropey, isn't it, with all those weak dark squares everywhere, but the engines were sort of hoping that was the best thing, but yeah, they weren't very hopeful about survival chances. Both Stockfish and Torch winning quite a few games there as white. But Tartakower played bishop g7, bishop c4, hitting f7, and now the move e6 was played. Again, the engines want f5 to be played in this position, followed by e6, and try and develop that way. I mean, the nice thing about playing f5 is that it stops the knight coming into e4 in the end. So yeah, at least it makes it a little bit harder for white to exploit some weak dark squares, later. But e6 played by Tartakower, and now bishop f4, and Engine's getting quite desperate now. Queen c7 was played by Tartakower, and here a little deviation. Leonhardt played castles, which has got a very concrete, specific idea behind it. It's probably not the best. The Engines wanted just castle queenside. Black takes the pawn. I mean, you have to try and get rid of the attack. And then rook e1 and then queen g5 check. I think that's why Leonhardt didn't want to put the king on the queen side, because black gets out of there with gain of tempo. And now knight f6 just to stop the knight getting into e4. But the Engines, yeah, I mean, they always like these types of positions. They just think this is just too much dynamic attack, basically. Rook d4 is a very strong move, threatening h4. And if queen f5, we've got rook f4 and lining up on this one. So king e7 played, but then rook f4. We're now lining up on this one and the f7 pawn behind it. Rook f8 and now h4. Here we are. Queen can't defend the knight on f6, so queen c5 played. And then we go rook f6, queen c4. We hit the queen on the way back, and then we come in with knight e4. And queen e5 pins the knight to the rook. That's lovely. But we sidestep with rook d1. Then we've also got threats of queen a3 check, hitting the king on e7. It's the sort of thing that Engines find very easy. Humans, might find it a little bit more tricky just to find all the moves to keep the attack going. But you can see, I mean, it's just a relentless attack basically, and the Engines think it's +3 or something like that. They're just really very keen on white's position. Leonhardt's idea was to play castles, and that's not silly at all. What's the point of it? The point is that after bishop e5, he wanted the move knight b5, which is very, very nice. So just exploiting this attack along here. And Tartakower believed him in actual fact. But the very best that Tartakower could have done here was to play the move bishop c takes b5. So we've got the move bishop e5, this nice intermezzo. If queen e5, we take on a8, and we're hitting the bishop on c8. So just completely winning there, basically. But bishop b7, and now white's actually, probably not got much better than taking on c7, taking on f3, bishop b5, a6, bishop d3, and bishop b7. This is what the Engines think is best for white. They give white sort of a slight to clear advantage in the endgame. I mean, obviously, very weak dark squares everywhere, and nice queenside pawn majority as well. But yeah, it's not winning by any means. So that would have been the very best that black had. But queen b8 was played by Tartakower, and now Leonhardt got motoring, takes, and then just rook d1. So threatening this move knight d6 check. Well, that's pretty huge. C takes b5 allows queen a8. So d5 played, and now rook e1. So you've got to say that this is a beautiful, classical, romantic stuff. Sacrifice to pawn, but all your pieces are in the attack, albeit quite a few are attacked. But queen b8 played by Tartakower, not much development there. And then we've got all sorts of things that white could do here. Leonhardt played the most natural human move, I think. The Engines were very keen on this move, on throwing in this move queen c3, hitting h8. And the idea is after f6, you can play the move bishop d5, c takes d5, and not even knight c7 yet, but rook takes d5. And we're just aiming for knight c7 and then rook d8. And, it is completely killing, basically. There's no worries about that. This knight can't develop very well because of a queen takes f6. So it's completely horrific basically. But Leonhardt played bishop takes d5, which is pretty powerful too. C takes d5 and then queen takes d5. And we've just got all sorts of ideas, basically. I mean, queen takes a8, queen a8, and knight c7 check is just one simple idea. So bishop b7 was played by Tartakower. There was also maybe somewhat better was to go king f8 and just run to the king side like that. So white gets the rook back, and if you go knight f6, we pin you nastily like this, and then look to go rook d4 and g4 to g5 and rook f4, that sort of thing. But yeah, still requires some work. For the engines, it's easy. Humans, obviously, slightly less. Bishop b7 was not so great. Got quite a few different ideas here. Knight d6 check was played by Leonhardt. Actually, queen c5 was even nastier here, with the idea of knight c7 check. So, for example, if you go knight e7, I can go knight c7 and just rook d7, and it's totally curtains this. Just black's completely lost there. But okay, yeah, this, obviously we've seen this before. Leonhardt didn't always finish brilliantly. He went knight d6 check, king f8 and queen e5, but that's good enough. I mean, we're hitting this guy, and yeah, if f6, we'll go queen takes e6. So bishop d5 was played by Tartakower, quite ingenious. The idea is after takes. So it looks like black's got some material, but now we've got this move c4. And, well, this pin on the bishop along the d-file is completely finished. So rook e8 played, c takes d5, and then e5, keeping things, well, tight at the back, as tight as possible. But another pawn goes, king moves into the center, and, well, Leonhardt didn't mess this up. He went rook h3, he went g4, gave some checks. I'm not sure I would have given the knight a spot on f4, but anyway, it all sort of continued. f7 went as well. Knight e2 check, king g2, and, well, the game did not last long. d6, opening up the line of the queen, protecting everything, and now rook c1, threatening mate. Queen e6, queen b8, queen d8, and Tartakower resigned. A sparkling little game there, pretty well played, and some nice little tactics, and well, also seeing how the openings went in the early 1900s, still feeling out all the different move orders and things often going wrong there. There we are. Hope you enjoyed that. I might find another game or two of Leonhardt sometime, but probably move on to something else quite soon. But thanks very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this little series on a little-known player who played some very exciting games. And do stay tuned for all that's coming next on the channel. Thanks for watching.